First, let's start with this case. For context, I don't think anyone here is necessarily in the wrong. But we found ourselves in a difficult situation. I met my wife when she was pregnant, and she gave birth to Julie, 15. I've been her dad in every sense that matters since she was born. I'm a stay-at-home dad, and my wife works. Julie's biological father isn't involved, and Julie has my last name. 2 years ago, we explained to her that I'm not her biological dad, but I've always been her dad in every way that counts, as I've raised her. We also have Olivia, 14, who's basically my mini-me. She shares many of my interests and even behaves a lot like me. Meanwhile, Julie has her own unique interests. Then there's Emma, 9, who's her mom's mini-me. Because of this dynamic, I think my wife is worried that Julie might feel left out, even though we work hard to ensure that doesn't happen. Julie is always included, and my wife goes out of her way to make sure each of our children gets one-on-one time. We're both actively involved in their hobbies and interests, ensuring that none of them feels neglected. My wife has always been particularly concerned about Julie, as she's more sensitive than Olivia. While we once had her assessed for autism, she wasn't diagnosed, but she currently sees her school guidance counselor for support. Recently, my wife and I have been discussing the possibility of having a 4th child. I'm more interested in the idea than she is, but we've been talking about it. I also mentioned it to my mom, who views Julie as much her grandchild as our other kids. During that conversation, I made a comment, out of context perhaps, that it's nice my wife got to experience all of Julie's firsts, and I got to experience my firstborn, Olivia. Now, my wife is upset because she feels that by calling Olivia my firstborn, I'm implying I don't love Julie as much, or that I'm picking and choosing between our children. She feels I've diminished my role in Julie's life, even though I've always considered her my daughter. My mom has tried to step in by reassuring my wife, and even taking Julie for a sleepover, to show that Julie is as much a part of our family as Olivia and Emma. However, my wife believes my mom's actions are more about wanting another grandchild than truly addressing the situation. I'm confused and feel terrible about this misunderstanding. I love all my kids equally and never meant to make my wife or Julie feel otherwise. But now, I'm wondering if I'm in the wrong for how I worded things. Let's start judging. So if I understand this correctly, you referred to Olivia, your middle child, as your firstborn. Why did you do that? You were with your wife from before Julie's birth, have raised her as your own. So if your only distinction or intended distinction is biology, I think that was tone deaf of you, as you've spent the last 15 years of Julie's life being her dad from birth. So yes, I can see why your wife was upset and feels there is a dynamic of you feeling and acting like Olivia and Emma are your real children, and Julia is not. I think you should look inwardly at what you might be bringing to the table. Referring to your second oldest child as your firstborn was a misstep. I'll go. You're in the wrong for that, and encourage you to think about other things that you might have said or suggested that were in that same vein. Perhaps you aren't as accepting of Julie as you think you are. As someone with a half-brother whose father abandoned him and thus was raised by my own dad since he was 18 months old, you're in the wrong. He has always considered my brother his son, and my brother has ever known him as Dad. When my sister came along right before my brother turned 3, it was even easier to feel like one cohesive family with one mom and one dad. My brother is mixed race and has his bio dad's last name, who refused to allow my dad to adopt. So the "you're not mine biologically on paper, but you're still my son" conversation had to come a lot earlier for him than for Julie. My brother and dad are quite different in temperament, patience, interests, etc. Of course, having his DNA, me and my other siblings are more like my dad than my oldest brother. This has absolutely no weight when considering which child is actually his firstborn, though. To hear my dad refer to my sister as his firstborn would throw us all for a loop. What is my brother then? While he wasn't there for his birth, my mom and dad were parents together before they were even married. My brother was there from the beginning. I'll play devil's advocate for a second. Maybe this is a semantics thing. You said my firstborn Olivia, which is technically correct in that she is your first biological child. So why you're in the wrong? Because you say you met your wife while she was pregnant with Julie. I assume you were either there for the birth or were around, falling in love with your wife shortly afterward when Julie was a newborn. Maybe you weren't living together yet. Maybe you weren't feeding her bottles and changing her diapers. But now Julie is undoubtedly your child. Just because Olivia was born to you and Julie wasn't, doesn't mean Olivia is your firstborn. I will say that the additional steps you've taken to make sure Julie doesn't feel othered or abandoned are good. Every kid should get one-on-one time and have their interests supported. But maybe it's not enough if you don't consider her your first kid. You don't mention how Julie feels about any of this, so I can't speak to that. But your wife's concerns can't be unfounded. Try to remember that you, your wife, and Julie began this family all together. You were all there from the beginning. Don't exclude her when considering birth order of your kids. You're in the wrong. It would be different if you were stepdad and came into the mix when Julie was much older. But you raised her, witnessed all her firsts and her being born. She didn't even know she wasn't biologically yours until recently. It's very strange that you don't consider her your eldest. I think you need to look inward and think about why. You're even a stay-at-home dad, which makes this even worse. For over a decade, she didn't even know she wasn't your bio kid. Did you refer to her differently even then, or now that it's out in the open, you feel you don't have to hide your true feelings anymore? SMH. No way you haven't treated Julie differently. I don't think she's sensitive. I think she just knows how to read the room and has been picking up on the fact Dad likes her less, her whole life, and didn't know why. Next up, 22 years ago, I was in labor with my son for 16 hours. My ex-husband, we've been divorced for 12 years but have maintained a cordial relationship, stayed with me throughout the night. Around midnight, I told him to go home, get some rest, and take care of our dog. I fully expected him to return bright and early the next morning. But he didn't. All my family had gone home, and I was left alone and scared. By 1 in the afternoon, when he still hadn't shown up, I called him, demanding that he return to the hospital. It turned out he was gaming. He did come back, but not until around 5 that evening. Last night, during my son's birthday dinner, I shared the story about his birth and the hospital stay afterward because it naturally came up in conversation. My ex took offense, thinking I told the story just to make him look bad. This morning, he texted me, calling me a few names, the mildest of which was idiot. I didn't apologize, and I wasn't planning on it. I honestly didn't tell the story with bad intentions. I was simply recounting the events of my son's birth. Still, I figured I should get an outside opinion. If you think I'm the idiot for telling a story that painted my ex in a negative light, I'll send a group text apologizing. I decided to text him. I'm sorry your past actions embarrassed you. That was not my intention. I left it at that. Let's start judging. You're not in the wrong. Are you supposed to lie the rest of your son's life? Your ex-hubby needs to face the music. I'd tell him you didn't mean to embarrass him and ask him what info he would like given if anyone asks again. My ex went home and took a nap while I was in labor. Mind you, my labor started at 9 a.m.-ish, went into hard labor at 1 p.m.-ish, had my son at 5 p.m.-ish, 8 freaking hours, and he needed a nap after 2 hours of waiting. He went home and slept for 4 or 5 hours and came back when family members started calling him and yelling. I don't lie about that. He made the choice, he lives with the judgment. Facts made him look bad, not you. You're not in the wrong, and this is hilarious. My husband did a similar thing. Told him to leave. He has a bad back and hospital didn't provide him a bed. And go home, but his buddies took him out to celebrate our daughter being born. Showed up the next day hungover after 2 p.m. My daddy wanted to kill him. We got past it, and now our daughter loves hearing this story because it's funny, and yes, I do make him sound bad. It sure as hell wasn't good. But he was in the doghouse with me for weeks. You're not in the wrong. Next up, long story short, my aunt stole $10,000 worth of cash and 2 cameras from my house a couple of months ago. I didn't notice they were missing until yesterday because I'm rarely home and the cameras aren't used often. Plus, I don't routinely check the cash I keep in my place. Fortunately, I have several hidden security cameras set up around the house. Once I realized the items were missing, I checked the backup footage, and I was shocked to find that my aunt had taken them. She stayed at my house with a few other family members back in early August. I immediately told my mom, who confronted my aunt, and everything spiraled from there. My mom and I want to go to the police right away and also pursue a civil case. This isn't the first shady thing my aunt has done, so I'm fed up and feel strongly about reporting her to hold her accountable. However, my cousin called me in tears, pleading with me not to involve the police. They offered to pay me back for what my aunt stole. My cousin and I are very close, and I know that if I go to the police, it will cause a permanent rift in our family. While accepting my cousin's offer would avoid family drama, my aunt wouldn't face the consequences of her actions, and I worry this behavior will continue. I'm torn. I'd get my money back without much conflict, but I'd be letting my aunt off the hook. On the other hand, reporting her would bring justice but likely destroy family relationships. Would I be the idiot if I went to the police? Edit, thanks for all the insightful responses. After much thought, we've decided to go to the police tomorrow morning to report the theft. I realize my aunt likely won't ever repay me, but I feel a responsibility to hold her accountable and try to stop this behavior from happening again. I can replace the stolen items, but I can't live with the idea of her stealing from me without any repercussions. Let's start judging. You're not in the wrong. Your cousin isn't an idiot for asking, but they are an enabler for your aunt. If your aunt didn't want to risk punishment for being a thief, she shouldn't have stolen in the first place, let alone from family. If she hadn't stolen from you, there would be nothing for you to report. This reminds me of episode 1 of Ozarks, where there was a what-if scenario where you catch a lifelong employee stealing. The correct answer was you fire her immediately, because this isn't the first time she stole, just the first time she got caught. You said yourself she has a shady past. Do you really think this is her first time stealing from family? Or do you think she's been emboldened by past actions? I can't answer this because I don't know her. Your cousin may intervene and you'll get your money back. But isn't that just kicking the can down the road for another transgression? You don't leave hot coals around to flare up later. You drop a huge bucket of water on them. Calling the police is your way to stamp this out. Next up, background. My wife, 39F, and I, 34M, have been married for 8 years, and we have 2 children, ages 5 and 1. Between 2020 and 2022, we faced significant losses. My wife lost both of her parents, and I lost my mother. It has been a difficult few years, but we've supported each other through it. As part of her inheritance, my wife received her family home, located in a different country, as well as a substantial amount of money that her parents had saved. Now, we're facing a dilemma about what to do with the house. Since it's in another country and doesn't serve any practical purpose for us, I believe selling it and investing the proceeds would be the best course of action. It could allow us to set up our kids for the future and potentially retire comfortably within 15 years. My wife agrees that selling is the best option, but the issue is when to sell. I want to sell now, while she wants to wait another 5 years. Originally, when we first discussed it, she suggested waiting 3 years. I've been very hands-off during the process, because I understand how emotionally difficult it is for her to part with her family home, especially after losing her parents. I've encouraged her to move at her own pace. However, as we approach the 3-year mark, I feel we're missing out on a major financial opportunity by delaying the sale. Her primary concern is that her aunt currently lives in the house and hasn't decided when she'll move out. Her aunt is a wonderful person who has supported my wife throughout this difficult time, and we both agree that she deserves any help we can offer her. To address this concern, I suggested we set aside $50,000 as a gift for her aunt. This money could be used to help her rent a place nearby, or if she prefers, for anything else she wants. It would be completely unconditional. I hoped this solution would allow us to move forward with selling the house while ensuring her aunt is well taken care of. However, when I presented this idea, my wife responded by saying that all I care about is money and that I'm being greedy. I understand that she's likely dealing with a lot of emotions surrounding the loss of her parents and the family home, so I didn't push the issue further. But now, whenever I bring it up, she continues to characterize me as greedy and accuses me of wanting to throw her aunt out after everything she's done for us. This really hurts because I genuinely believe I'm trying to act in the best interest of our family's future. I want to be supportive and understanding, but I also feel that delaying the sale indefinitely isn't wise. I'm starting to wonder if I'm being insensitive or if my focus on the financial aspect makes me appear more money-driven than I realize. Am I being greedy? Or is there a better way I can approach this? Let's start judging. You're in the wrong. It's her choice at the end of the day, not yours. Does your wife have siblings or other close family? Not counting you and the kids. I ask this because it'll move it from soft to hard. You're in the wrong. I'm assuming not, as she inherited everything from her parents, which she lost young. One parent loss is not the same as both. Your wife has put emotional connection with a family member as her priority over financial gain, short and long term. If this is her remaining close family member, then you have more chance of seeing a flying pig in a tutu and sombrero than having her kick her aunt out. This is because she is scared of losing her remaining close family. Every time you suggest moving the aunt out by paying her off, you are belittling that fear. You really buried the lead here. This isn't about the money or property. It's about the fact that she doesn't want to evict her aunt. You treating it like it's a purely financial decision is why you're in the wrong. You're in the wrong. Your wife values her family above financial calculations. It's her separate property. Apologize, tell her you admire her devotion to her aunt, and drop the subject. Also realize that when you are old and infirm, she likely won't move you to some dump of a nursing home to save money, and count your blessings that you married a wonderful woman.